Ahem. A poem, if you will. On TV in the mid-2000s, a show was cut and quickly grounded. Years went by and people found it. They all watched and were astounded. After 20 years on ice, the show will get another try. To prepare, I watched the first one, learned the who, what, when, where, and why. So I finally watched Clone High. Let me ask you all a very special question. You ever flip through the pages of your history book and think to yourself, oh yeah, I ship it. Yeah, me neither. But apparently two best buds woke up one day with this kind of mindset and began writing a pitch pilot about clones of famous historical figures taking the forms of attractive teens and going to a specially made high school run by a psycho self-insert and his iron husbando. They would witness all the hurdles and unavoidable dramas that come with teenhood, while the government secretly awaits their full development so they can use their physical and mental prowess as tools in an unstoppable army. And it would come to be known as Clone High. Now, if you were handed this pitch full of literal Mad Libs, you'd probably have one of two reactions. Either, oh yeah, we've got another one, or maybe, yeah, we've got another one. And honestly, both of these responses are warranted since this is both the stupidest and most genius idea ever put to paper. And it was brought to us by the kings of surprise masterpieces, Phil Lord and Chris Miller. These guys are pretty much director royalty as far as I'm concerned. Time after time, they've done the impossible, taking tired, overdone franchises and seemingly doomed concepts and squeezing liquid gold out of them every single time. Films I adore, films I respect, films I adore and respect. And there isn't a single movie I've seen from these guys where the dopamine didn't hit like a brightly painted 2-ton semi. But Clone High back in 2002 was the first time that this duo tackled a creative project where they had control over everything. From directing to writing to producing. And you can tell from the dialogue and humor alone that their self-aware and inventive charm is stamped all over this thing. It poked fun at all manner of tired high school drama tropes, while also using the tried and true emotional strengths of said tropes to keep people engaged for more reasons than just a quick laugh. It may have been cancelled after only one season, but I guarantee that if this series was released nowadays, it would have killed with modern day audiences. And who knows, I might be proven right, since a full-fledged reboot was announced in mid-2020 and is officially releasing this coming Tuesday, complete with many of the original creators and cast on board with it. The mere thought of something like this happening after a double dose of decades is kind of insane, and after binging the show like blue paint and pancake batter, context is important, kids. I'm pretty excited to see where things are gonna go. But before we even think about the show's future, I wanna crack open some dusty yearbooks and reminisce on the past, to see why the original Clone High struck a chord with so many people for so long. How much substance was actually hiding under this insane premise? And how did they use said premise to their advantage? Well, allow me to educate you on the merits of this program and what the fans and creators did to preserve it after all this time. I'll title it, So I Finally Watched Clone High, an overused reference. Let's do it. So as I mentioned before, the premise of Clone High is that a shadowy government organization, literally called the Secret Board of Shadowy Figures, hires a scientific nutcase named Scudworth to clone famous figures from history for a secret military project of epic proportions and questionable legality. The clones end up coming out of their tubes as teenagers, so Scudworth opens up a high school for the clones so he can monitor them. And the series follows the clones as they go through the struggles and dramas of typical teenhood, albeit exaggerated a lot of the time for some well-earned laughs. Now before we do anything else, I need to emphasize just how practically perfect of a premise this is for a high school drama parody. I mean, think about it. What are some of the biggest obstacles that people face during their teenage years? Well, there's living up to expectations set by parents, schools, and themselves, discovering more about self-identity and who they truly are, and of course, starting to learn about the inner workings of this complicated thing called life. And if you take a very close look at Clone High, you'll see that these same struggles are tackled, but in interesting new ways that make total sense for the concept. These guys carry the literal DNA of some of history's head honchos, from warriors to leaders to moon-conquering studs, meaning the expectations set for them are way higher than the average teen. Figuring out who they truly are is difficult because no matter what they try, they will always be in the iconic shadow of the world-redefining person they came from, even sharing the same name. Plus, understanding how life works is especially hard for the Clone High kids since their journeys began with their teenage years. They had no parents, no childhood, nothing beforehand. This is literally their first taste of life, period. So learning the ins and outs of how to navigate it is even harder for them when compared to most people. Clone High takes these typical teen troubles in a whole new direction while still retaining the relatability factor. Heck, if anything, I want to root for these guys even more than most just because of how much weight is on their shoulders. And when I say that the premise is also a really stupid idea, they take advantage of that too. They lead into the insanity of the premise so much that it opens up plenty of avenues for humor. Jokes that play on the clone aspect, jokes that play on the history aspect, jokes that play on the overdone high school tropes, and so much more. They have an air of seriousness when the show requires it, but everything is always wrapped up in a package of self-aware charm. And it allows you to have just as much fun watching the show as they clearly did making it. Just from premise alone, Clone High really feels like anyone could get something from it. Teens can relate to the exaggerated but still grounded problems, people who just want to laugh can enjoy the self-aware tongue-in-cheek tone, and I get to sound smart by explaining all this to you. Everyone's a winner! I'm a winner! However, it's not just a good concept that makes a good show, it's how you use it. Ha! That's what she said, and by that I mean it's what you said, but I'm mocking the suggestive double meaning! Yeah, thanks, JFK. Anyway, while the show clearly had a fantastic idea at its core, it still needed to make sure that the characters and comedy were up to snuff. Cause when you make a teen drama parody, your show is gonna live or die off the strength of those aspects. And after binging the show like 10 or 12 times, it did a lot more than just live, it thrived in my opinion. Let's look at the comedy, for example, starting with the way that the show itself is structured. Every episode of Clone High is treated like a very special episode. This means that it either focuses on telling an important message, such as don't litter, don't do drugs, and get informed about various diseases, or it involves one of the huge significant events from any high school program, like the student body election, the standardized test, the obligatory holiday episode, and of course, the epicenter of all high school culture, the inescapable galaxy-shattering event that determines the fate of every teen on television! The prom. But with the show being a parody, it pokes fun at literally everything in these cliched, overdone plots. I mean, in the drug episode, the substance of choice is raisins. Yep, raisins. Good luck trying to eat Sun-Maid or Raisin Bran on this campus. That's back alley stuff now.
What are you doing up there? I can't go back to jail!
Plus, they hid all kinds of secret messages throughout the episode, taking jabs at the idea of subliminal messaging that tends to happen in these PSA episodes. Not to mention this hilarious reverse message from JFK.
I am talking backwards and telling you to watch Clone High, and for us to get an Emmy, I'm saying that backwards.
Jeez, my dude, how did you get your voice to do that? I've heard enough. Get off the screen now. Thank you. The holiday episode revolves around an all-encompassing winter holiday called Snowflake Day, making fun of those episodes that don't mention specific holidays just to be all-inclusive. But this one goes in the complete opposite direction. Not only mentioning every other holiday by name, and having a title that's no doubt a jab at those fragile folks who get all hissy when their holiday isn't acknowledged, but also having the mascot of Snowflake Day, Snowflake Jake, actually round up the symbols of Christmas, Hanukkah, and Kwanzaa and show them the light so they can be as inoffensive as he is. They even do it in a Rankin-Bass stop-motion format, which is incredible. Though, don't expect Santa to be a fiery redhead in this version. Disappointing, I know.
Anyone else think that Santa is kinda sexy?
In the littering episode, the garbage that the students coat the campus with actually kills someone. Yeah, littering winds up leading to a graphic on-screen death of a character. I'm not going to show you guys the scene since I value your innocence, but it's hilarious that this episode takes the message of littering kills as literally as possible. Plus it kind of harkens back to those old-timey PSAs that tried as hard as they could to shock you, but most of the time just came off as hilarious. And of course, what teenage rom-com would be complete without a season finale involving the prom? And they basically do everything you'd expect them to, including breakups, makeovers, and love realizations, while cranking the insanity up to 11. In fact, if the show went on for longer, the duo actually had plans to make proms a running gag, with like 7 or 8 proms taking place throughout the year. They would have an early winter prom, a late winter early spring prom, a mid-semester prom, and a post-prom cleanup prom. Oh, come on, guys, you could do better than that. How about a midterms prom, or a summer vacation prom, or a we just refilled the soap dispensers in the boys' bathroom prom? Come on, guys, you're not thinking big enough. Beyond the premise, there are obviously a lot of historical references and jokes as well. And don't panic, you won't have to cheat off someone's homework to get a good laugh. In fact, MTV thinks so little of its audience that they specifically asked the creators to dumb down the historical stuff as much as possible. So if you have at least a 5th grade knowledge of American and world history, you'll be able to get a kick out of most of these gags. Like Marie Antoinette being beheaded, Joan of Arc getting burned at the stake, Napoleon having a complex, references to the Gettysburg Address, Van Gogh's bedroom looking like his actual painting, The Bedroom, and plenty of jokes about presidential assassinations. With that being said though, there are definitely some deeper historic references that you could read into if you wanted. For instance, I'm aware that the real Cleopatra used her feminine charm and influence over others in order to gain more power, affecting all kinds of famous rulers like Julius Caesar, which is similar to how Clone High's Cleopatra influenced Abe and JFK in order to get herself re-elected as the student council president. But now I want to talk about one of the biggest surprises in this show for me, and that's the character cast. And I call them a surprise because in the span of only 1 season, these guys went in a direction I did not see coming at all. At first, they're just the basic high school stereotypes that you expect in these types of shows. Abe is the nerdy protagonist that simps after the popular girl, Joan is the best friend who secretly likes the nerd but he's totally oblivious, Cleopatra's the hot cheerleader who uses others to get what she wants, Gandhi is the loudmouth comic relief, and JFK is the handsome jock with a peanut brain. Obviously, the writers use these one-note personalities to make all kinds of jokes. And to be fair, the character interactions and one-liners are the best source of comedy in the entire show. Plus, I do have to give credit to the Clone High students for not just being carbon copies of the figures they came from. Well, okay, genetically they are, but personality-wise, there's a lot of variety in regards to how much they match their historic counterparts. Some embrace the legacy of their counterpart wholeheartedly like Cleo, some reject it entirely like Joan, some are kinda on and off like Abe, some try to follow in their footsteps but end up becoming the complete opposite like Gandhi, and some are JFK. Just freaking clueless. It's a nice spicy bit of variety that helps differentiate the cast even more. But the real magic with these characters is, believe it or not, their development. Yeah, what started off as one-note cliches actually develop as time goes on. And as the series progressed, my thoughts on these characters shifted a lot. I mean, you take one look at Joan and you pretty much see no traces of Joan of Arc anywhere. And this makes sense because in her own words, she couldn't live up to Joan's legacy and became a cynical, angst-ridden goth girl. But when she starts hearing what she thinks are religious voices, she pretty much follows them without question. You could say that she was just listening to Jesus' advice, but I feel that deep down, under all the cynical comments and thigh-high boots, she still yearns for validation. She wants the feeling that she can really live up to the Joan who came before, and is willing to chase down any potential sign that she could one day fill the shoes of such a legacy. You can wear your atheistic, nonconformist attitudes like a badge all you want, Joan, but it's evident that at least part of you does still desire to live up to your literal hot crusader mama. Cleo started off as the popular girl who simply used people for her own gain and constantly sought out instant gratification. But later in the series, we got to see a more growing sympathetic side to her, as well as evidence that she's perfectly comfortable being in a single, loving, caring relationship. Honestly, the whole stereotype of the high school popular girl always seems so tragic to me. Only having friends based on good looks, wealth, or alpha female energy, coasting from guy to guy in order to snag material possessions? What a lonely, shallow existence that must be. But after staying with Abe for most of the series, which in and of itself is a huge subversion, she was able to see early in life that an actual emotional connection is far more rewarding than constant gold digging and manipulation. She still keeps her full of herself personality throughout the series, but clearly changes for the better. Heck, in the season finale when Abe admits that he's in love with Joan, she is downright heartbroken, and I really felt for her. Abe in my eyes is the perfect combo of all the likable and frustrating elements of the typical nerdy male lead. Seriously, this guy is more dense than a shonen protagonist made of pure lead, always oblivious to the feelings of a girl who does everything short of throwing herself at him. Heck, this guy could have been the clone of Babe Ruth and he still wouldn't be able to catch what she was doing. I've heard that a lot of people say that Abe is their least favorite character in the show just because of how agonizingly slow he is. But luckily in the finale, he does get a fitting karmic ending where he essentially loses everything and now needs to start from scratch. I don't necessarily hate the guy, but I will admit that this is exactly what Abe needed to hopefully garner a platform for change, much like his presidential counterpart. Sorry dude, you had multiple chances with 2 gorgeous girls and you blew them all. Looks like you're gonna be alone for a while.
The last time I scored was 20 years ago.
Gandhi is incredible. The G stands for GOAT. And JFK, yes, John freaking Kennedy, might be my favorite character in the whole show. Sure, you've got some superficial stuff like, oh, he's so dang funny, he's got such great one-liners, he's a living meme. And yeah, those things are definitely awesome, but we find out later on that he's more than just a beefcake with a derp face. If anything, he's a pretty cool guy. In the littering episode, for example, JFK is forced to deal with the fact that his friend, Ponce de Leon, is dead. Ponce as a character is obviously meant to be a joke, not just with the obvious Happy Days reference, but the fact that he was introduced in this episode specifically to die. They even try to convince you that he's always been there and that he's always been a main character, just to make him seem more important.
Are you guys ever apart? Oh, Ponce, you are a regular character.
But even though Ponce is a joke to us, the emotions that JFK go through feel very real. Depression, denial, a need for a shoulder to cry on. He even says that if he had one wish, it would be to have his friend back by his side. There's no other word for that other than straight up adorable. And it does a lot to show JFK's fragile, delicate, and very genuine emotional side. In the makeover episode, he enters a bet with his reflection that he can get Gandhi a date for the prom. But by the end of the story, he actually admits that he warmed up to Gandhi. And when Gandhi chews him out for faking kindness, he doesn't try to deny it or defend himself. He actually admits that he screwed up, which is a fantastic display of newfound humility that is night and day when compared to the first episode. And that little talk between him and Joan in the season finale, where he says that he just likes her for her, showing the apex of his development and the ability to see girls as people instead of just broads, probably one of my favorite moments in the whole show. And even though he ends up putting his, vote in her ballot box right afterwards, JFK says that he never saw it coming, meaning all that nice stuff he said wasn't just to get with Joan, he actually meant it. Everything he said was unfiltered and genuine. Mr. Kennedy, you are a gentleman and you're a gentleman. And to you, I tip my hat. Oh, no need for that, buddy. I'll do it for you. Keep the change, sunshine. I'll even have my buddy Andrew sign it if you want. I guess the last guys I should talk about are Principal Scudworth and Mr. Butlertron. And I know I might get crucified for this, but I only thought they were okay. Considering they were voiced by Lord and Miller themselves, they're obviously creators' pets, complete with a side story in every single episode. And while I do give them credit for having a ton of variety in what they do, it's always a roll of the dice when it comes to entertainment value. Their adventures range from hilarious to decent to boring to really obnoxious. And while I wasn't opposed to seeing what they were up to every time, I much preferred the stories involving the students. The back and forth between them, though, is full of fantastic moments. And even when their jokes aren't the best, their breakouts and banter are audio hilarity. And speaking of audio, I gotta give a lot of credit to the way this show sounds. And I don't just mean the voice acting. I mean, the voice acting is awesome, inflections are good, performances are solid, Abe's scream is hilarious, Gandhi's delivery's gold, Jesus should have had more lines, and I love how JFK keeps increasing the pitch of his voice every time he finishes a sentence. It's true. Half the time I talk at great lengths on a given subject as I yearn for the sweet embrace of my friend, the ever-elusive, powerfully conclusive, potentially punctual period. He'll be fine. But yeah, while the voices are stellar, I also gotta give credit to the soundtrack and sound effects as well. For the soundtrack, Clone High tended to use a lot of licensed songs, which is fitting for a show that aired on the music television. And instead of focusing on the stuff that was popular on the charts, they went for lesser-known indie rock bands, making it sound like they just ripped a playlist straight from a teenager's MP3. They had Hot Rod Circuit, Save the Day, American Football, Dashboard Confessional, Catch-22, Take Back Sunday, and of course Abandoned Pools. The same guys who wrote and sang that legendary theme song. Seriously, it's like the perfect summary of the show wrapped in a blanket of angst and grunge, and I love it. And the sound effects, especially during the slapstick moments, are loud and crunchy. It really sounds like it hurts, which just makes it all the more funny, especially when it comes out of nowhere.
Luckily, the extra height doesn't feel that awkward. I'm up.
You were thinking it.
I know.
Also, special mention goes to the most ambitious episode of the series, Raising the Stakes, which tried to be a full-scale rock opera in the vein of Jesus Christ Superstar, despite being the first season and obviously not having the budget for it. But hey, credit where it's due, they do go all out with tons of original music, great accompanying visuals, and Jack Black in a fantastic guest appearance, all shown in a completely absurd plot that fits perfectly with this style of episode. It's not my favorite in the series, but for the time it came out, it rocks pretty hard. And last but not least, we have the visuals. You can tell that Lord and Miller really did their homework on this. They understand the importance of changing the speed and execution of the visuals to fit certain moods, like using less frames and a faster pace for the funny bits, and making things more smooth and slow moving for the emotional or romantic bits. And the actual character designs themselves are super stylized, while also fitting the figures they represent perfectly. Abe is obviously very tall, like Lincoln, but has very noodly limbs and a lanky build, perfectly showing how nerdy he is. Cleo, with those half-circle eyes and pointed edges on her hair, looks like she was ripped straight out of an ancient Egyptian mural. Gandhi's head looks almost exactly like a G, which is perfect for our legendary G-Man. And JFK? Yeah. This is all the handiwork of designer Cary Yost of Cartoon Network fame. And if you look at all the characters from the shows he's worked on, you can definitely see some heavy similarities in the Clone High cast, with all the pointed angles, unique body proportions, and very standout silhouettes. Oh, and if you're getting massive Total Drama vibes from all these designs like I did at first, well, don't worry, you're not going crazy. Total Drama's art style was actually heavily influenced by Clone High. In fact, lead TDI designer Todd Kaufman actually did design work for the intro of Clone High before his work became famous on our favorite teen Survivor series. Wonder if that reboot's any good. Probably not. I'll admit that I wasn't too keen on the backgrounds at first, with some elements looking visually awkward and sometimes completely out of place. Like, what the heck is going on outside this window or with these lockers? But like everything else, I eventually warmed up to it and just accepted it as part of the stylization. If anything, I actually really appreciate it now. Helps to spice up the usual bland high school scenery with some UPA-inspired visuals. I honestly can't think of another show from this era that looked anything like this, which means it clearly did its job of standing out well. So yeah, TLDW, pretty much everything about this show worked. It could be funny when it wanted to be, emotional when it wanted to be, ridiculous when it wanted to be, and grounded when it wanted to be. It seemed like a show that could easily have as much staying power as Futurama or BoJack if it stayed on the same path. But it simply wasn't meant to be. You see, with the exception of like one or two shows, cartoons on MTV had a notoriously short shelf life back then, usually only lasting one season before being scrapped. And Clone High was already suffering from low ratings at the time, so it was pretty much doomed no matter what. But one little occurrence managed to push things way over the edge, an event that's become notorious within the Clone High fandom.
Here's the traitor, your majesty.
Say what?
Yup, Gandhi is the one that put the final nail in the coffin and sealed the show's fate. And the saddest part is that there was never any targeted attack on the show itself. There was just a series of unfortunate events at one point involving the mistreatment of the real Gandhi's image, leading to Clone High getting caught in the crossfire. Back when Clone High was still up and running, a publication known as Maxim Magazine created a comic which included a rather beefy fellow beating up on the real Mahatma Gandhi. I'm not going to show it to you since it's in incredibly poor taste, but long story short, Indian citizens heard about this article, got understandably mad, and did an internet search to try and find the comic. But during their hunt, they came across the Gandhi that we all know and love, and seeing their favorite promoter of peace as a wild, brash party animal didn't really sit well with them. This led to a massive hunger strike on the anniversary of Gandhi's assassination, with 150 Indian citizens, including members of the government, taking part. And if that wasn't bad enough, Tom Freston, the head of Viacom and owner of MTV at the time, was visiting the network's Indian branch and was apparently trapped inside the building, according to reports. And the protesters declared that they would revoke MTV's broadcasting license in India if Clone High didn't go bye-bye. Now, there are obviously arguments that you could make in the show's favor, one being that this is not the real Gandhi, just a clone that came from Gandhi's DNA, so technically not the same person. Plus, if you looked at the way that actual young Gandhi behaved, this can technically be considered historically accurate. Seriously, Gandhi was a rebel, going against his societal customs of religion and vegetarianism all the time in his youth. But I'm not gonna downplay the outrage or anything. This guy was a symbol for peace, arguably one of the most influential Indian people to ever live. And because Indians were already having a bad day because of this disaster, I can't say I blame them for acting like this. So obviously the clones couldn't carry on given everything that happened. And despite the creator's attempt to pitch a version of the show where Gandhi wasn't an issue, like making him a mislabeled clone of Gary Coleman, Viacom just never went for it. So in the end, all the King's horses and all the King's men agreed they would never air Clone High again, and it was completely scrubbed from the network, including reruns. Needless to say, Lord and Miller were very upset about this. And even though they did move on to other projects, you can tell that they've still had Clone High on the brain for a very long time afterwards. Heck, they even said that their entire film career is just an extended attempt to try and bring back Clone High in one way or another. And while I'm sure that was mostly meant as a joke, if you look at some of their other projects, you can tell just how much they love this series. In the first Spider-Verse movie, you can actually see a poster for a Clone High movie called Clone College, complete with Abe and JFK's faces in the original style. My guess is that in this plane of the multiverse, Clone High was never cancelled and actually became the success that the duo wanted it to be. And as someone who peruses the multiverse on the regular, that is both the funniest and most tragic thing I've ever seen. Also, Spidey's Christmas album has a song on it that looks like it came straight from JFK's Snowflake Day album. It's beginning to look a lot like a non-denominational holiday. In the Lego movie, they got Will Forte, who voiced Abe, to play the real Abraham Lincoln. He only gets a few lines though, so we don't get to hear any of Abe's insightful comments.
And I wear my heart on my sleeve, so when I wiped my face,
I got heart all over it.
Heck, they even stated that many of the jokes from 22 Jump Street were pretty much taken straight from Clone High. Looking at all these Easter eggs and many of the interviews they've conducted, I just feel really sorry for these guys. But as we all know, good things come to those who wait. And eventually, life decided to throw Lord and Miller a massive bone for all their patience. On July 2nd, 2020, the artist formerly known as MTV officially announced that a Clone High sequel/reimagining has been confirmed and is in the works. They weren't clear on where it was going to air since both Lord and Miller were preoccupied with multiple projects on different networks, but eventually the release date was set in stone and scheduled for May 23rd, 2023 on HBO Max. Heck, we even got some pretty hyped trailers for what's to come, with most of the cast like Nicole Sullivan, Will Forte, Lord, and Miller sounding like they haven't missed a day. I'll admit that there are some things that make me a little nervous, like a few jokes that go way too over the top, and the designs of the new characters clashing heavily with the old gang. Seriously, how do we go from subtle clones to fruity cones?
How about you, big fella? Snow cone?
Not to mention the obvious cast exclusion that was inevitable but still really hurts. But honestly, no matter how the show turns out in the end, the fact that they were given this opportunity at all is really motivating. Clone High was hit with the biggest streak of unlucky breaks I've ever seen for a show, and yet Lord and Miller never gave up on it. They tried multiple times to repitch it and bring it back after it tanked the first time. They worked in tandem with the fandom to keep the legacy of the show alive through word of mouth, jokes, discussions, and Easter eggs in their other works. They knew their show was something special, and everybody else knew it too. And because they never gave up, they got that second chance they so desired. This is a nice little reminder that if you have something you truly think is special, even if it completely fails the first time, don't give up right away. Keep moving forward, keep hoping, keep evolving your craft and working hard, and good things might just come your way. It's not a guarantee, nothing in life is an absolute guarantee, but hey, if these guys can dig up their baby and clone it after it's been dead for over 20 years, who's to say similar things can't happen to us? That's optimism, baby. Honestly, I've got really high hopes for what's to come with Clone High. And if they keep the same characters, comedy, and charm as the first time, then this will be a wonderful and welcome example of history repeating itself. And those are my thoughts on Clone High. I'll definitely be checking out and reviewing the reboot once it graces our streaming services, so be sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss that. But for now, what do you guys think? Do you have any fond memories of your times at this historic high school? Do you think the reboot has any chance at all to succeed? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and I hope to see you all real soon.